Hello friends, Jenkins Dota here. Welcome to another video, which is on behalf of Pvgna.com, of course, and this is part of the drafting video series. And in this video I'm going to be talking about how to actually draft a well-rounded draft in terms of like what to pick and when. So I'm going to talk about, of course, in the current meta, how to draft a well-rounded draft. So usually what you're going to want is something that has all of those elements that I talked about for the most part, something that isn't countered, something that has potentially strong late game or strong early game, which is uncountered. So like if you have a Meepo against no AoE, that's great, you know, that's a good draft, things like that. And then you also want to make sure that it does all of those things that I talked about that are the current meta, so capable of deathballing well, but also capable of doing a little bit of split push and a little bit of ganking. Because if you don't have all these things, then you're not going to survive in the current meta unless you do some sort of cheese strat that's something that's new and not seen before, which you know, you can do, but we'll leave that up to the PPDs and the Croakies and all that stuff for now. You know, I'm not gonna. We'll get into cheese strats later, but so essentially, we're gonna talk about just the order of picking things. So what do you want to first pick? What do you actually want to be first phasing? So in all pick, this is going to be things that are picked first. It's not really a phase. This is the first and second picks in all pick. So in all pick, it's going to be, you know, your team picks, the enemy team picks, your team picks, the enemy team picks. So these are those two picks. What do you actually get? So for the most part, what you usually want to first phase in both all pick and captain's mode is typically a support and then a versatile hero. So let me give you a couple examples of these. So some nice supports to pick in the first phase are, you know, Disruptor, Crystal Maiden, you know, Witch Doctor, even Wyvern. Rubik is a very common one. Shadow Demon is a very common one. These are actually kind of the two overpowered ones right now. People are starting to pick Dazzle more. And the reason you're picking a support this early is because it doesn't really reveal much about your draft, and you still have another support to pick. So if the enemy team picks something that's very counterable, you can of course pick another support to counter it. And it doesn't lock you into anything. Not very many support picks will lock you into either an aggro tri-lane or a dual lane mid. None of these supports that you can pick in this phase are going to hurt your team's draft and make the enemy team have a better draft than you. The only thing is, like, they could counter the hero, but it's like, do you really want to invest in countering a support? Like, it's a support, man. People don't really. So picking a support in the first phase is very, very nice. And then on top of that, there are strong, versatile, overpowered, at least considered overpowered supports. So something like a Shadow Demon or a Rubik are really nice here because these are two supports that are considered both overpowered and then also are just versatile and don't reveal much about your draft. So that leads into the second thing, and kind of the second slash first pick. The other thing that you should pick in the first phase is probably a core, just to leave that support pick available. If you want to do a roaming setup, if you want to do a dual lane, you want to leave that other support available till that second phase, so you can kind of respond and figure out what you actually want to do without revealing much about your draft. So the next thing that you should pick is a versatile core. So either it needs to be a core that's very overpowered and not versatile, something that like potentially is so overpowered that even though there are hard counters to it, you still want to get it that early because you're worried people are going to pick or ban it. So something like in pubs, a Slark is a really good hero to pick within the first two, because a lot of people will just pick Slark because they don't want to play against it, and because people are Slark spammers and they know they need to pick it early to actually get it. So of course, picking these overpowered heroes for pubs, even though Bloodseeker exists and it's a really, really good counter to Slark, Slark is considered so powerful that he's actually worth that first phasing. So it's kind of, he has this forced versatility, by virtue of just being so overpowered that even if you put them in a situation where they're countered, you still think it's pretty fine, you know, it's worth the risk essentially. But in a real draft, in a captain's mode draft, for the most part, you're not going to have very many of these blatantly overpowered heroes. In fact, these ones that are considered overpowered will usually be considered overpowered because of their versatility. So picking you know, a Juggernaut, he can go mid, he can go safe lane. It doesn't reveal whether or not he's mid or safe lane by picking him in the first phase. He can even aggro. He's decent enough solo. he's a strong enough hero that even if he's counterpicked, it's all right. He's a nice versatile hero. Luna is the same thing. She's capable not of going mid, but she can aggro. She's pretty good even if she's counter, because she just is a strong hero, and she doesn't reveal very much about the draft, and she's strong enough that you can pick her in the first phase. So I guess I can go through some offlaners that are in that same kind of boat. So of course Slardar, overpowered, versatile. He has a stun. He can't really, you know, these heroes, if you're familiar with Super Smash Bros., these are the ones that my team for a long time would call the Marios. So the heroes that you can kind of have them in any game, and it's like, that's pretty good, you know? Like, you're not feeling too bad about having a Slardar on your team in any situation. I mean, hell, even if you have no physical damage to benefit from that amplified damage from Slardar, he's still pretty good to have on your team because he has a big AoE stun, he's fast, and then he does a lot of damage, right? You're pretty happy to have a Slardar on your team, so he's just a good versatile hero. And potentially if you have people selecting, like people who want to play Meepo, people who potentially want to play some cheesy carry, like if you want some carry and want to get away with some a really, really easy game by virtue of having a really strong carry that's uncountered, like a Drow Ranger or a Terrorblade, then you can pick an offlaner. And it honestly just depends on what people feel like playing, what strategy you're trying to run, what the support pick is. If the support that you picked is a Crystal Maiden, she's not very good at pushing, but she's very good at ganking. She's very nice at sustaining mana. She's good at jungling, so she can get nice amounts of XP. But she's not as good of a tower pusher as Dazzler because he heals the creep wave. So if you want to pick a hero, it's very nice to make sure that it's a versatile one, but also one that's good with the support that you picked in mind. Or you can even do a combo, of course, because synergy is obviously very important. I will do an entire video on synergy later in the series, but you know, if you want to pick some support duo some duo between a support and a core that has some really, really nice synergy, then absolutely go for it. And the only time I would actually recommend in the first phase picking 2 cores is if you want to get something that you think is going to be countered or banned. So getting Slardar and where's this guy? Nyx, Lifestealer, there he is. So getting Slardar Nyx almost always requires you to get it in the first phase because people are fully aware of this combo, and in pubs they're going to block pick you by picking a Nyx if you've picked Slardar, or picking a Slardar if you pick Nyx. And in Captain's mode, if you pick a Slardar in the first phase, it's very, very likely that Nyx is going to get banned if your carry has not been selected yet. Likewise, if Slardar has not been selected yet, and you've picked a Nyx, it's very likely that the Slardar is going to immediately get banned. So sometimes you do have to first phase these combos, only if they're extremely strong. And of course, it's actually nice to pick this combo in the first phase because Slardar Nyx, Slardar can be a core, or he can be a support, so he's got that versatility, whereas Nyx doesn't necessarily, although he's actually quite strong in aggro, so that's the only reason you can kind of get away with it here. What you wouldn't want to pick in the first phase is something like an Anti-Mage Axe, right? There's no special synergy between them. There's no real good reason that you need to pick them in the first phase. They're very counterable, and you're showing your hand, you're showing 2 of your cores for no good reason, and they don't have that versatility. You know Axe is going to be offlane, you know Am is going to be safe lane, so you don't actually have that versatility in the draft, and that's just a good counter example of some bullshit that you shouldn't pick in the first phase. So that's the first phase. Then the second phase comes, and usually the second phase bans are going to be specialty bans. They're almost always going to be your Invokers of the Invoker players, your Meepos of the Meepo players, your Slarks of the Slark players. People almost always will ban either counters to heroes that they have currently picked, counters to heroes that they want to pick, or specialty bans of heroes that people are really, really good at. So this is where you're going to see all the Meepos and Invokers and stuff like that. And then coming into the next phase, usually what you want to do is you can pick... So at this point you've already had a versatile hero selected and a support. You almost always want to pick the next support in this phase, and it doesn't really matter if it's first or second. It just depends on what you feel like people want to play, or what heroes are part of the strategy that you can get away with picking. So for instance, something like second phase first picking a Batrider is... What are they going to do? Pick Venge? You know what I mean? It's like, do you really care that much? You can do that. But if you wanna pick like a Slark, for example, do you want to give them that pick to maybe pick a Bloodseeker or something like that? So it just depends on what you pick first, depends on what is more counterable. And usually what you're going to pick in this phase is, like I said, in the first phase, it's very likely you're going to either pick a versatile offlaner or a versatile carry plus a support. During this phase, you're going to pick either the roamer or the 4-role lane support, and then also a an offlaner or a carry. And these ones don't actually have to be versatile, because at this point you're probably going to reveal a decent amount about your draft, and they only have one ban left. So going into that last ban phase, this ban is usually going to be a targeted, this is the cheese hero ban. The last ban is almost always the cheese ban. And almost always the last pick and last ban are going to be mids. And the reason for that is because the mid lane is very, very crucial to have a winning matchup, because it's mostly a 1v1. And if the supports do roam, it's usually both supports on both sides will roam. And it's a very snowball heavy lineup and matchup. And if one person gets ahead, then they can absolutely crush and snowball into the other person. So gaining a nice matchup here is really, really important. So if you have that last pick, usually you're going to pick something really cheesy that's going to win mid. And if you have that second last pick, usually what you're going to do is you're going to pick something like a Viper, or you're going to pick a Weaver and have multiple options of where you can put heroes based on the last pick. You know what I mean? So you're essentially, if you have that second last pick, you're trying to make sure that whatever you pick mid, it can either go jungle like Shadow Fiend if you get totally countered. You're not really going to pick a TA if they still have a mid pick available and they can pick a Viper, unless you ban Viper, because it's just so counterable. Actually, TA can kind of go jungle, so it's not the absolute worst. Maybe that was not the best example, but essentially what you're if you have that last pick, you're going to go for the cheesy mid, and you're going to try to win mid really, really hard. And as a result, that forces the first pick, last pick, to have to pick something that's very versatile in the mid lane. And that's why you always end up with these cheesy heroes on the last pick team, and then these non-cheesy mid heroes like the Shadow Fiends and the TAs and the Vipers on the non-last pick team. So that's usually what you save the last pick for. And I think the same thing goes for pubs. You want to save the last pick for your TAs, your Terrorblades, your where's Meepo? Where's that guy? He's Agi. Where are you, little buddy? There he is. For your Meepos. So these cheesy heroes that you're going to win the game based on having no counters to these heroes. Essentially heroes that if they're uncountered, they're going to get huge and win the entire game for you. That's what you want to save the last pick for. And if somebody's highlighting a Meepo in a pub, or if one of your teammates in a competitive game is really, really good at Meepo, have this option available. Don't get greedy with the picks. Like, don't pick things that are going to result, or don't try to save your pick until the end, because you want these cheesy heroes to be the last picks, because they're just free wins if you can get them. And in almost every game, there is a cheesy hero that you can pick that's going to win the game. So there are actually teams who have won tournaments doing that. Cough, cough. Pretty much every Peruvian team did that. They have these cheesy ass picks, and it's just so painful to deal with them, because you don't have enough bans to ban them all out, because they're all just so good at these like cheesy heroes. And that's where the last pick comes in. And like I said, the second last pick team is going to probably be picking some very standard Mario mid who can deal with whatever. So that's that. That's kind of like the whole order and how to draft a well-rounded team. Of course, with the previous video in mind, you have to consider what you're lacking, what you actually need. So that's a 30-minute video. I won't go into that in detail, because you can just watch that entire video, which maybe you have already. But you should be, of course, considering that in mind. But the order that I talked about in terms of what actual roles to pick in what position is what a lot of people stick to right now. And of course, things change. You have your PPDs and your other captains who will win a TI, and they'll completely change the way things are drafted. But currently, right now, this is mostly how people are picking. And perhaps it's because people are being very safe, because there's no huge tournaments going on. But for whatever reason, this is how it is. And I think it is the strongest way to win a game right now, especially in pubs. So thank you for watching. If you have any comments, please leave them below. I like I said in the previous video, and maybe ones before, I do reply to everything. So hopefully you can comment and I'll reply to it, and there'll be some nice conversation going on. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.